The true origins of the Elden Ring and the Greater Will's influence predates the Golden Order by an unfathomable span, hinting at cosmic powers far older than the lands between's recorded history, powers that shaped reality itself before gods walked among mortals, before the Erd Tree cast its golden light across the world, before even the concept of life and death as we understand them took their present forms. This revelation casts every ending available to the tarnished, every possible fate you can choose for the shattered realm, in a profoundly different light, because each conclusion to your journey does not simply represent a personal choice or a moral alignment, but rather a fundamental restructuring of the cosmic order itself, a rewriting of the rules that govern existence, mortality, divinity, and the very fabric of reality across the lands between, and perhaps beyond. When Queen Marika the Eternal shattered the Elden Ring in an act of rebellion or desperation or divine madness, she did not merely break a powerful artifact or trigger a war of succession among her demigod children. She fractured the underlying metaphysical architecture of the world, unleashing possibilities that had been locked away, sealed beneath layers of golden orthodoxy and divine mandate, possibilities that reach back to those ancient cosmic forces that existed before the Greater Will imposed its vision of order upon the land. The 6 distinct endings available to the player, each tied to a different character's questline, a different philosophical vision, a different understanding of what the world should become, represent not merely alternative conclusions to a single story, but rather competing cosmologies, rival interpretations of what it means to rule, to live, to die, and to exist in a universe where gods can be slain and the fundamental laws of nature rewritten by those bold or foolish enough to claim the power to do so. The Age of Fracture, the default ending achieved by simply completing the game's primary objective and mending the Elden Ring in its most straightforward form, represents a conservative restoration, a return to the status quo ante, the Golden Order rebuilt much as it was before, with you as Elden Lord serving as consort to a goddess, maintaining the same hierarchies, the same rules, the same cosmic structure that Marika herself found so intolerable that she chose to destroy it. And this ending asks whether such restoration is truly desirable or whether it merely sets the stage for the same cycle of suffering and eventual rebellion to repeat itself in ages hence. The Age of Duskborn, achieved through Fia's questline and her embrace of those who live in death, fundamentally alters the nature of mortality itself, weaving death into the fabric of order rather than treating it as an aberration to be purged, allowing those who exist in the twilight state between life and death to persist within the world's structure rather than being hunted as abominations, a radical reimagining of what it means to exist and what forms of being deserve recognition and protection under the cosmic order. The Blessing of Despair, the ending tied to the Dung Eater's horrifying quest and his obsession with the curse that defiles the soul across generations, represents perhaps the darkest possible future, one in which curse and suffering become not merely present in the world, but woven into its essential nature, where every soul is born defiled, where the very concept of grace and blessing is inverted into its opposite, an ending so bleak that it challenges the player to consider whether some choices, some exercises of power, are simply too monstrous to contemplate, regardless of the philosophical framework one might construct to justify them. The Age of Order, achieved through Goldmask's questline and his pursuit of a perfected, mathematically pure version of the Golden Order, stripped of the flaws and contradictions introduced by the gods' own capricious natures, represents an attempt to create a system of cosmic law that operates with mechanical precision, uncorrupted by divine whim or mortal weakness. A technocratic vision of perfection that raises profound questions about whether a universe governed by pure, unyielding logic is truly desirable, or whether the imperfections and contradictions of the current order serve purposes we do not fully understand. The Age of Stars, Ranni's ending, and perhaps the most popular among players, severs the land between from the influence of the greater will entirely, replacing the golden guidance of the Erd tree with the cold, distant light of the moon and stars, ushering in an age of uncertainty and freedom where mortals must navigate their fates without divine intervention, without cosmic mandates, without the comfort or tyranny of a higher power dictating the terms of existence, an ending that trades security and order for autonomy and the terrifying responsibility that comes with true freedom. The Lord of Frenzied Flame ending, the most destructive of all possible conclusions, embraces the power of chaos and entropy itself, burning away not merely the current order, all distinction, all separation, melting everything back into the primordial unity that existed before creation, differentiated into individual beings and things, an apocalyptic vision that asks whether existence itself, with all its suffering and division and conflict, is a mistake that should be unmade. Whether the solution to the world's pain is not to reform or restructure reality, but to annihilate it entirely and return all things to the undifferentiated flame from which they came. Each of these endings is tied not merely to a gameplay decision made in the final moments of the game, but to extensive quest lines that span the entire journey, to characters whose philosophies and motivations you must understand, to items and lore scattered across the vast landscape of the lands between, to choices made hours before you ever reach the final boss, creating a narrative structure in which the ending is not simply appended to the story, but grows organically from the path you have walked and the alliances you have forged. The genius of Elden Ring's narrative design lies in how these endings are not presented as simple good or evil choices, not as obvious moral binaries where one path is clearly righteous and another clearly damned, but rather as genuinely competing visions of what the world should be, each with its own internal logic, its own philosophical justification, its own understanding of what has gone wrong and how it might be set right, forcing the player to grapple with genuinely difficult questions about order and freedom, mortality and immortality, divine guidance and mortal autonomy, the value of suffering and the price of peace. The fact that these endings exist at all, that the game allows you to fundamentally reshape the metaphysical structure of reality itself, speaks to the central themes of FromSoftware's design philosophy, the idea that power and choice are inseparable, that to claim ultimate power is to bear ultimate responsibility for the consequences of how that power is wielded, that there are no solutions without costs, no visions of the future without their own inherent contradictions and potential for new forms of suffering. Understanding these endings requires understanding not just what happens. In the ancient past of the lands between, long before the establishment of the Golden Order as we know it, the cosmos itself would intervene in the fate of this realm. The greater will, an outer god of order and causality existing beyond the stars, looked upon the lands between and determined that this world required its influence. To enact its design, the greater will would not descend itself, but instead dispatched a living weapon, a vassal of pure golden essence known as the Elden Beast. The arrival of this entity would fundamentally reshape reality in the lands between. Witnesses in those primordial times, if any records could have survived, would have seen a golden star streaking across the heavens. But this was no ordinary celestial body, no mere meteor or comet following the predictable paths mapped by ancient astronomers. This golden star carried within it the will of an outer god, and its destination was fixed with cosmic purpose. The impact site of this golden star has been lost to the erosion of ages, though some scholars theorize it may have been the very location where the Erd tree would eventually take root, creating a connection between the heavens and the earth that would define the metaphysical geography of the realm for millennia to come. Upon its arrival, the Elden Beast did not remain in the form of a creature, at least not initially. Instead, this vassal of the greater will underwent a transformation that would become the foundation of all order in the lands between. The Elden Beast became the Elden Ring itself, a metaphysical construct of golden runes and cosmic law. The Elden Ring is not simply a physical object, though it would later manifest in physical forms. It is better understood as a set of fundamental rules, a cosmic operating system that governs life, death, destiny, and the very nature of existence within the lands between. Each great rune that comprises the Elden Ring represents a different aspect of reality, from the principle of life itself to the mechanisms of death, from the bonds of kinship to the hierarchies of power. This establishment of the Elden Ring marked the beginning of what would eventually be called the Golden Order, though that term would not be coined until much later, after Queen Marika's ascension. In these earliest days, the manifestation of the greater will's influence took a different form, one more primal and less rigidly defined than the dogmatic structure that would follow. The physical embodiment of this early order was the crucible, the primordial form of what would one day become the great Erd tree. The crucible was not the towering golden beacon visible from every corner of the lands between that later generations would worship. Instead, it was something far more ancient and wild, a churning cauldron of life energy where all forms of existence blended together in chaotic harmony. The very name, crucible, evokes the image of a melting pot, and this is precisely what it was. Within the energies of the crucible, the boundaries between different forms of life were not merely blurred but essentially non-existent. Life that emerged from, or was touched by the crucible, bore characteristics that later ages would consider monstrous or aberrant. Horns, wings, tails, scales, and other bestial features manifested in beings that also possessed humanoid or divine qualities. These were not mutations or deformities in the context of the crucible. They were simply expressions of life in its most fundamental and undifferentiated state. The crucible represented a time before the rigid categories and hierarchies that the Golden Order would later impose, a time when a creature might possess the nobility of a knight and the physical characteristics of a beast without any inherent contradiction. The grace that flowed from the crucible was similarly unified and undifferentiated. Grace, the golden blessing that marks those chosen by the Erd tree and the greater will, existed in this era as a single, all-encompassing force. There were no distinctions between those who possessed grace and those who did not, no tarnished stripped of their blessing and exiled from the lands between. Every living thing touched by the crucible partook of this grace in equal measure, creating a form of existence that was simultaneously more egalitarian and more chaotic than what would follow. Yet the greater will's arrival and the establishment of the Elden Ring did not occur in a vacuum. The lands between already possessed rulers, already had an established order, albeit one of a very different character. The ancient dragons, beings of stone and lightning whose scales were harder than any metal, and whose command of the red lightning marked them as apex predators and natural sovereigns, held dominion over the realm. These were not the lesser dragons that later generations would hunt for sport, or the degraded drakes that would infest caves and mountain tops. The ancient dragons were divine beings in their own right, possessed of intelligence, culture, and a civilization that predated any human kingdom. At the apex of this draconic hierarchy stood Dragon Lord Placidusax, a being of such immense power that he possessed not one, but multiple heads, each capable of independent thought, yet unified in purpose. Placidusax was not merely a powerful dragon, he held the title of Elden Lord, suggesting that even before the Greater Will's direct intervention through the Elden Beast, there existed some form of the Elden Ring or a proto-version of it. Placidusax served as Elden Lord to his own god, an entity whose identity has been completely erased from history, lost to the same forces that would eventually reduce Placidusax himself to a diminished shadow, awaiting the return of his deity in a space outside of time. The relationship between Placidusax's reign and the arrival of the Elden Beast remains one of the great mysteries of this ancient era. Did the Elden Ring exist in some form before the Greater Will's intervention, only to be transformed and claimed by the descending Golden Star? Or did Placidusax's title as Elden Lord refer to a different cosmic structure entirely, one that was supplanted or absorbed by the Greater Will's design? The fragmentary nature of records from this time makes definitive answers impossible, but the evidence suggests a period of transition, perhaps even conflict, between the old draconic order and the new golden dispensation. As the crucible established itself and its energies began to reshape life in the lands between, certain warriors emerged who would embody its primordial power. These were the Crucible Knights, champions who bore the blessings of the Crucible in their very flesh. Unlike later knights who would serve the Golden Order through faith and discipline alone, the Crucible Knights manifested physical transformations that marked them as touched by the primordial Erd Tree. They grew horns, sprouted tails, developed breath weapons, and gained other characteristics that blended human and bestial natures. In the age of the Crucible, these features were marks of honor, signs of deep connection to the source of all life. The Crucible Knights served as protectors of this ancient order, their strength drawn directly from the chaotic vitality of the primordial tree. Among all the beings in the lands between during this ancient era, one would be chosen for a destiny that would reshape the entire world. Marika, whose origins remain shrouded in mystery, was selected as the vessel for the Elden Ring itself. The Erd Tree begins to grow, drawing power from the Elden Ring itself, and as it does, its roots spread deep into the earth, penetrating the very bedrock of the lands between. This is not merely botanical growth, but a metaphysical expansion, a physical manifestation of the Greater Will's authority, taking root in reality. The tree's golden boughs reach skyward, visible from every corner of the realm, becoming an omnipresent symbol of the new order. Its roots tap into the crucible of life itself, the primordial soup from which all living things emerged, and begin to redirect that fundamental energy. Where once life flowed freely in chaotic patterns, it now channels through the Erd Tree, filtered and sanctified by the Elden Ring's laws. The tree becomes a conduit, a living bridge between the cosmic will of the Greater Will and the material world below. The Golden Order's influence expands outward from this central axis, gradually supplanting the ancient ways that had governed the lands between since time immemorial. The old faiths, the primal incantations, the worship of flame and storm and stone, all of these begin to fade as the Golden Order's doctrine spreads. This is not an overnight transformation, but a slow, inexorable tide. The Golden Order brings with it a new understanding of reality, one codified in scripture and law. Fundamentalism, the study of the Golden Order's principles, emerges as a discipline. Scholars begin to parse the nature of the Elden Ring, identifying its individual runes and understanding how each one governs a specific aspect of existence. The rune of death, for instance, is recognized as the principle that governs mortality, while other runes control concepts like abundance, causality, and the very structure of life itself. This intellectual framework gives the Golden Order tremendous power, for to understand the Elden Ring is to understand the fundamental code of reality. Villages that once practiced their own local customs find missionaries arriving, bearing the word of Queen Marika and the promise of grace. The grace itself, that golden light that will later guide tarnished warriors, begins to manifest more clearly during this era, marking those who are favored by the Erd Tree. To be graced is to be chosen, to have a place in the new world that is being built. The ancient dragons, those primordial beings who had ruled the skies since before recorded history, find themselves challenged by this nascent Golden Order. The dragons are creatures of the ancient world, embodiments of raw elemental power, particularly lightning, which they wield with devastating effect. Their scales are harder than any mortal metal, their breath can reduce stone to slag, and their very presence inspires primal terror. For ages, they had been the apex predators of the lands between, unchallenged and unchallengeable. But the Golden Order represents something they have never faced before, not merely physical might, but ideological certainty backed by cosmic authority. The conflict between the dragons and the Golden Order is inevitable. Placidusax, the ancient dragon lord, had served as Elden Lord in an age before the Erd Tree, when the greater will communed with the world through different means. But that age is fading, and Placidusax's god has fled, leaving the dragons leaderless and vulnerable. The war that follows is cataclysmic. Dragon fire scorches the land, and entire armies are incinerated in moments. Yet the Golden Order has something the dragons lack: purpose and unity. Where the dragons are mighty individuals, the Golden Order is a coordinated force, and it has champions of its own. Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, rises to power alongside Marika during this tumultuous period. He is not born to nobility, not descended from gods or ancient bloodlines. Godfrey is a warrior, pure and simple, but a warrior of such extraordinary prowess that he becomes legendary. Before he takes the name Godfrey, he is known as Huaralu, a chieftain of the Badlands, a place beyond the reach of civilization where only the strong survive. His strength is not merely physical, though his physical might is staggering, but also strength of will. Marika recognizes in him the perfect instrument for her ambitions. She takes him as her consort, elevating him to the position of Elden Lord, the first to bear that title in the age of the Erd Tree. But Godfrey's savage nature, his berserker rage, poses a problem. A lord must be more than a killer. He must be a symbol of order. To temper his bloodlust, Marika bestows upon him Sarosh, the regent beast, a spectral lion that clings to Godfrey's back and shoulders, suppressing his most violent impulses. With Sarosh's restraint, Godfrey becomes not just a warrior, but a king, capable of strategy and statecraft as well as slaughter. Under Godfrey's leadership, the Golden Order's military campaigns begin in earnest. He leads the war against the ancient dragons, and it is in this crucible of combat that the techniques of dragon worship first emerge. Some of Godfrey's warriors, rather than simply slaying dragons, study them, learn from them, and eventually develop incantations that channel draconic lightning. The dragons, despite their power, are gradually pushed back. Some are slain, their corpses becoming monuments to the Golden Order's triumph. Others retreat to hidden places, to mountain tops and forgotten valleys. A few, recognizing the inevitability of the Golden Order's victory, choose a different path. Placidusax withdraws from the world entirely, retreating to a place beyond time itself, waiting eternally for the return of his vanished god. Other dragons, pragmatically, make peace with the new order. The golden lineage is established through the union of Marika and Godfrey, and their offspring become the first demigods of the Golden Order. Godwyn the Golden is the eldest and most beloved, a prince who embodies all the virtues the Golden Order claims to represent. He is valiant, noble, and graceful, bearing the golden grace so strongly that it seems to radiate from his very skin. Where Godfrey represents the Golden Order's martial might, Godwyn represents its ideals. He is not merely a warrior, but a diplomat, capable of forging alliances where his father would have forged only submission. It is Godwyn who ultimately ends the war with the ancient dragons, not through annihilation, but through accord. He befriends Fortisax, one of the mightiest of the ancient dragons, and through this friendship, a pact is formed. The surviving dragons are integrated into the Golden Order, their power harnessed rather than destroyed. The dragon cult is formalized, with knights learning to channel lightning through prayer and devotion. This is a masterstroke of statecraft, turning former enemies into pillars of the new regime. The Erdtree's grace, that golden light, becomes more than just a marker of favor. It begins to manifest as a distinct phenomenon, visible to those who are blessed and invisible to those who are not. The graced can see golden light streaming from the Erdtree, forming paths and pointing toward purpose. This grace guides warriors to glory, pilgrims to enlightenment, and the faithful toward their destiny. To lose grace is to be cast adrift, purposeless, and forgotten. The tarnished, those who will later be exiled from the lands between, are not yet conceived of, for in this golden age, the concept of losing grace is almost unthinkable. The concept of Erdtree burial emerges as both a religious practice and a practical necessity. When the graced die, their bodies are returned to the roots of the Erdtree, where they are absorbed back into the great tree's essence. This is considered the highest honor, a literal return to the source of all grace. The dead do not simply decay, they are recycled, their life energy feeding the Erdtree, which in turn sustains the living. This creates a closed loop, a perfect system where death is not an ending but a transformation. The Erdtree grows ever larger, fed by the countless souls returned to its roots. Catacombs are constructed throughout the lands between, elaborate underground structures designed to channel the dead toward the Erdtree's root system. Erdtree burial becomes the expected fate of all who live under the Golden Order's dominion. The Golden Order begins its campaign to unify the lands between under its dominion, and this unification is both cultural and military. Godfrey's wars continue, targeting not just dragons, but all who resist. The giants of the mountaintops of the giants, beings of enormous size who tend the flame of ruin, become the next great enemy. The flame of ruin is a primordial fire, capable of burning even the Erd Tree itself, and its existence is intolerable to the Golden Order. Godfrey marches north, and the war against the giants is brutal and total. The Golden Age would not last. In the centuries following the establishment of the Erd Tree's dominion, a series of cataclysmic events would shatter the divine order and plunge the lands between into an era of endless war known as the Shattering. The exact date of these events remains lost to history, but what we do know is that they occurred sometime before the Tarnished, that is you, the player character, would return to claim the title of Elden Lord. The Shattering began with an act so shocking, so incomprehensible, that its reverberations would tear apart the very fabric of reality itself. Queen Marika the Eternal, the goddess who had established the Golden Order and ruled for untold ages, took up her hammer and shattered the Elden Ring. The reasons behind this act remain one of the greatest mysteries in Elden Ring's lore. Some scholars suggest she was driven mad by grief. Others propose she sought to rebel against the greater will, the outer god that had granted her power and imposed its order upon the world. Still others believe she discovered some terrible truth about the nature of the Golden Order itself, something so profound that it compelled her to destroy everything she had built. What we do know is that the greater will punished her immediately and severely for this transgression. Marika was imprisoned within the Erd Tree itself, her body shattered and suspended in crucifixion, neither alive nor dead, unable to act, but forced to witness the chaos her actions had unleashed. When the Elden Ring shattered, its fragments did not simply disappear. Instead, they transformed into powerful artifacts called Great Runes, each one containing a portion of the ring's divine power. These great runes scattered across the lands between, and Marika's demigod children, her offspring by various consorts, moved quickly to claim them. Each demigod who obtained a great rune found themselves empowered beyond measure, but also corrupted by ambition and the intoxicating taste of godhood within their grasp. The great runes became both the prize and the curse that would drive the demigods to wage war against one another in an endless struggle for supremacy. No single demigod proved strong enough to claim all the great runes and restore the Elden Ring, yet none were willing to surrender their fragment to another. This stalemate of divine powers, locked in eternal conflict, is the very definition of the Shattering. But the Shattering did not begin with Marika's act of destruction. Its true genesis can be traced to an earlier event, one that may have been the catalyst for everything that followed. On a night that would become known as the Night of Black Knives, the first demigod died. His name was Godwyn the Golden, and he was perhaps the most beloved of all Marika's children. Godwyn was the son of Queen Marika and Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, and he embodied all the virtues the Golden Order claimed to represent. He was a mighty warrior who had befriended the ancient dragon Fortisax and led the war against the ancient dragons to a peaceful conclusion through diplomacy rather than total annihilation. He was called the Golden not just for his lineage, but for his character, his nobility, his promise as the heir to the age of the Erd Tree. The Night of Black Knives was orchestrated by Ranni the Witch, a demigod daughter of Radagon and Rennala, and one of the Empyreans, beings chosen by the Greater Will as potential successors to Marika's godhood. Ranni conspired with a group of assassins known as the Black Knife Assassins, Numen women who were rumored to be close to Queen Marika herself, though whether Marika knew of or approved their actions remains uncertain. These assassins wielded blades imbued with the Rune of Death, a fragment of destined death that had been removed from the Elden Ring by Marika and entrusted to her shadow, the beast Malekith. How Ranni obtained a fragment of this rune is a tale involving theft, conspiracy, and the manipulation of forces beyond mortal comprehension. The Black Knives struck on a single coordinated night, and their primary target was Godwyn the Golden. But Godwyn's death was only half of a larger ritual. You see, Ranni did not simply want Godwyn dead. She wanted to die herself, or rather, she wanted to cast aside her flesh while preserving her soul. In the metaphysics of Elden Ring, death typically claims both body and soul together, but by splitting the curse mark of death between two individuals, Ranni engineered a way to subvert this natural order. On the night of Black Knives, Godwyn's soul was slain while his body lived on, and simultaneously, Ranni's body was slain while her soul endured. Godwyn became the first of those who live in death, his soulless body buried beneath the Erd tree's roots, where it would corrupt and spread like a cancer, giving birth to Deathroot and the undead abominations that would plague the lands between. His death was not a clean ending, but a grotesque half-existence, neither truly alive nor properly dead, a perversion of the natural order that the Golden Order had tried so carefully to control. Ranni, meanwhile, achieved her goal. By discarding her Empyrean flesh, she freed herself from the influence of the greater will and the two fingers that served as its emissaries. Her original body was destroyed, burned atop a tower in a manner that suggests she wanted to ensure no one could use it to bind her soul. She transferred her consciousness into a doll's body, a vessel of her own making that allowed her to act independently of the divine forces that sought to control her destiny. This act of defiance against the greater will and the Golden Order would eventually become central to one of the game's possible endings, but in the immediate aftermath of the Night of Black Knives, it simply added to the chaos and grief that was tearing the demigod family apart. The demigods were not a unified family even before the shattering. They were children of different unions, half-siblings with competing claims and conflicting ambitions. Malenia and Miquella were twins, born of Marika's union with herself, for Marika and Radagon were revealed to be two halves of the same divine being. This unusual birth left both twins cursed. Malenia, who would become known as Malenia, Blade of Miquella, was afflicted from birth with the Scarlet Rot, a horrifying plague associated with an outer god that rivaled the greater will for influence over the lands between. The Scarlet Rot was not merely a disease, but a manifestation of decay and corruption given divine power. It consumed Malenia's body slowly, rotting her from within, causing her to lose limbs that had to be replaced with prosthetics of unalloyed gold. Despite this curse, or perhaps because of it, Malenia became one of the greatest warriors the lands between had ever seen, undefeated in battle, her skill with the blade legendary, even among demigods. Her twin brother, Miquella, known as Miquella the Unalloyed, was cursed with eternal childhood. Despite possessing perhaps the greatest intellect of all the demigods, and being an Empyrean with the potential to succeed Marika, Miquella's body would never age, never mature, leaving him perpetually trapped in a child's form. But Miquella did not accept these curses passively. He devoted his considerable genius to finding cures, not just for himself, but for his beloved sister. He developed unalloyed gold, a pure form of gold that could resist the influence of outer gods, and crafted needles from this material that could suppress the scarlet rot within Malenia's body. He studied the fundamental nature of the Elden Ring and the Golden Order, seeking flaws in their design that he might exploit or correct. Eventually, Michaela concluded that the existing order was too flawed, too compromised by the greater will's agenda, and he set out to create an entirely new order, one free from the meddling of outer gods. To this end, he grew the Halak tree, a rival to the Erd tree itself, watering it with his own blood and attempting to nurture it into a sanctuary where those rejected by the Golden Order, the afflicted and the cursed, might find refuge. The scarlet rot that plagued millennia was not just a personal curse, but a cosmic threat. The outer god of rot sought to spread its influence across the lands between, and the stars themselves played a role in this entity's power. This is where another demigod enters the picture. Radon, son of Radagon and Rennala, was a warrior of immense size and strength, known as the Star Scourge General. Radon had studied gravity magic in the distant land of Celia, and he had mastered these arts to such a degree that he could manipulate the very heavens. At some point, Radhan learned that the stars' movements were connected to the fate of the lands between and to the power of certain outer gods. To prevent a calamity, possibly the full manifestation of the Scarlet Rot's patron deity, or the return of other cosmic horrors, Radon used his gravity magic to halt the motion of the stars themselves, holding them frozen in the sky through sheer force of will. This act would have consequences far beyond what Radon intended, for by stopping the stars, he also froze the fates of certain individuals whose destinies were written in the constellations, including Ranni the Witch, whose path required the stars to move freely. The war raged on, and no battlefield would become more infamous than the scorched plains of Kyled. Here, two of the mightiest demigods would meet in single combat, and their clash would reshape the very nature of the land itself. Millennia, Blade of Michaela, marched her forces eastward to confront Radon, the Star Scourge General, in his own domain. The reasons for this confrontation remain debated among scholars. Some believe Millennia sought to claim Radhan's great rune to consolidate power. Others suggest she was searching for a way to cure her brother Michaela's affliction and saw Radhan's mastery of gravity magic as a potential key. Still others whisper that Radhan himself had committed some offense against Michaela, prompting his sister's wrath. Whatever the cause, the two champions met on the battlefield of Ionia, and what followed would be remembered as the most catastrophic engagement of the entire Shattering. Radon was a colossus among warriors, a demigod who had grown so massive that his beloved steed, Leonard, could no longer bear his weight. Rather than abandon his faithful horse, Radhan had mastered gravitational sorceries, specifically to lighten his own mass, allowing Leonard to continue carrying him into battle. This same magic had been turned to martial purpose, and Radhan had once used it to hold back the very stars themselves, freezing the cosmos in place and halting the fate that the stars carried with them. His strength was legendary. His soldiers worshipped him not just as a lord, but as a living god of war. The Redmane Knights who served him were among the most disciplined and fearsome warriors in all the lands between, trained in a festival of combat that celebrated martial prowess above all else. Millennia was his equal in every way. Born afflicted with the scarlet rot, a divine plague that had been sealed within her flesh since birth, she had nevertheless become the most skilled swordswoman the world had ever known. She had never tasted defeat. Her prosthetic arm and leg, crafted from unalloyed gold by her brother Michaela, allowed her to fight despite the rot's ravages. She wielded a blade that flowed like water, a technique she had perfected through countless battles. Her soldiers, the Cleanrut Knights, had pledged themselves to her service, knowing full well that proximity to their mistress would eventually infect them with the same rot that consumed her. They accepted this fate willingly, such was their devotion. When Millennia's army arrived in Caelid, they found Radon's forces already arrayed and waiting. The battle began with the clash of armies. Redmane Knights met Cleanrot Knights in brutal melee. Radon's gravity sorcerers hurled massive boulders and bent the very weight of the world against their enemies. Millennia's forces fought with the desperate courage of those who had already accepted death, their armor slowly corroding, their flesh slowly rotting, yet still they pressed forward. The fighting was apocalyptic in scale. Thousands died in the opening exchanges alone. The sky above Caelid turned dark with smoke and ash. The ground trembled with the impact of Radon's gravity magic, and through it all, the two demigods advanced toward one another, each cutting through enemy ranks, like wheat before the scythe. When Millennia and Radon finally met, the battle reached its crescendo. Radon wielded colossal greatswords, each blade as tall as a man, swinging them with impossible speed despite their size. His mastery of gravity allowed him to leap hundreds of feet into the air and crash down like a meteor, cratering the earth with each landing. Millennia moved like a dancer, her blade singing through the air in flowing arcs, each strike precise and lethal. She was faster than Radon, more technical, her swordsmanship honed to absolute perfection. But Radon was stronger, more durable, his demigod constitution allowing him to shrug off wounds that would have killed lesser beings instantly. They fought for hours, perhaps days. The accounts vary, but all agree that neither could gain a decisive advantage. The battlefield around them had become a charnel house. Bodies of Redmane and Cleanrot Knights alike lay piled in the mud. The survivors had fallen back, creating a wide circle around the two champions, watching in awe and horror as gods made war. Millennia had been wounded, her prosthetics damaged, her body pushed to its absolute limit. But she had still never known defeat, and she would not accept it now. In her desperation, she made a choice that would haunt the lands between for generations to come. She surrendered herself to the Scarlet Rot, the goddess of rot, the outer god that had cursed Millennia since birth, had always dwelled within her, sealed away by her brother's unalloyed gold and by her own indomitable will. Now, at the moment of her greatest need, she released that seal. She bloomed. The transformation was instantaneous and horrifying. Millennia's body erupted into a massive flower of scarlet corruption, and from its center burst a wave of rot that swept across the entire battlefield. The Scarlet Aeonia, as it would come to be known, was a divine plague given physical form. Everything it touched began to decay. Flesh melted from bone, metal corroded to rust, the very earth itself turned sick and poisonous. The soldiers who had been watching the duel died screaming as the rot consumed them. The grass withered. The trees twisted into grotesque mockeries of life. The water turned foul and toxic. And Radon, standing at the epicenter of the bloom, was bathed in concentrated rot. Even a demigod could not withstand such corruption. The scarlet rot seeped into Radon's flesh, into his mind, into his very soul. He fought against it, his incredible constitution allowing him to survive what should have been instant death, but the rot was relentless. It burrowed into his brain, eating away at his sanity, his memories, his very sense of self. Millennia herself collapsed, the effort of the bloom having pushed her beyond her limits. She fell into a deep coma, her body racked by the rot she had unleashed. The battle was over, but there was no victor. Both champions had fallen. A clean rot knight named Finley, herself infected with the rot and slowly dying, refused to abandon her mistress. In an act of devotion that would become legendary, Finley lifted Millennia's unconscious body and began the long journey back to the Haligtree. The distance was vast, spanning the entire breadth of the lands between. Finley was wounded, rotting, carrying a burden that should have been impossible for any mortal to bear. Yet she persevered, fighting off scavengers and hostile forces, never resting, never stopping, until at last she delivered Millennia safely to the roots of Miquella's great tree. There, Millennia was sealed within the Haligtree, still comatose, still dreaming, waiting for her brother's return. Finley, her duty complete, finally succumbed to her wounds and the rot that had consumed her. Radon fared no better. The scarlet rot continued its work, devouring his mind piece by piece. The great general who had held back the stars, who had been a master tactician and a beloved leader, was reduced to a shambling beast. He wandered the ruins of Caelid, now a wasteland of rot and decay, mindlessly devouring the corpses of friend and foe alike. His Redmane knights, those who had survived, could not bear to see their lord in such a state, yet neither could they bring themselves to end his suffering. Instead, they established a festival, a tradition where warriors from across the lands between would be invited to Redmane Castle to challenge the fallen demigod. It was framed as an honor, a chance to face the legendary Star Scourge in combat, but in truth it was a desperate hope that someone, someday, might be strong enough to grant Radon the mercy of death. The devastation of Caelid sent shockwaves through the remaining demigods. The Scarlet Rot had proven that the war could destroy not just armies, but the land itself. The other demigods, already exhausted by years of conflict, began to withdraw to their strongholds. Rykard remained in his volcano, consumed by the serpent, dreaming of devouring the gods. Rennala stayed in her academy, lost in her grief and madness. Godric cowered in Stormvale Castle, grafting more and more limbs onto his body in a pathetic attempt to become stronger. Morgott continued his secret vigil in Lendil, defending the capital from all comers, but unable to claim the throne himself due to his cursed nature. The war had reached a stalemate, with no demigod strong enough to claim victory, and none willing to risk another catastrophe like Caelid. The lands between lay in ruins. Entire regions had been depopulated by the fighting. Trade routes had collapsed. Cities had been abandoned. The common people, those who had survived, huddled in whatever shelter they could find, preying on each other or simply waiting to die. The Erdtree still stood at the heart of it all, its golden light dimmed but not extinguished, its gates sealed shut, offering no guidance and no salvation. The demigods had failed in their war, achieving nothing but mutual destruction. And then, in the aftermath of this failure, the Greater Will made its final judgment. The outer god that had guided the Golden Order, that had empowered Marika and established the Age of the Erdtree, withdrew its grace from the lands between. The guidance that had once flowed from the Erdtree, the golden light that had pointed the way forward, simply vanished. The Greater Will, it seemed, had given up on the demigods, on Marika's fractured lineage, on the entire experiment of the Golden Order. The lands between were abandoned, left to rot in the consequences of their own ambition and violence. But the Greater Will had not entirely given up. There was one final gambit, one last hope for the lands between. Long ago, when Godfrey and his warriors had been stripped of grace and exiled, they had become tarnished, dead to the Erdtree's light. Now, in the wake of the Shattering's failure, that grace returned to them. The Tarnished, scattered across distant lands, dead and buried in foreign soil, suddenly saw the guidance of grace once more. It called to them, pulling them back across the fog that separated the lands between from the outside world. The dead Tarnished rose from their graves. The living Tarnished felt an irresistible compulsion to return. They came in small groups and as individuals, crossing back into the land that had once exiled them, drawn by the promise of the Elden Ring and the possibility of becoming Elden Lord. Among them were champions and failures, heroes and villains, those seeking glory and those seeking only to survive. The age of the demigods was ending. The age of the Tarnished was about to begin. And so, as the shattering concluded, the lands between entered a new, volatile period, marked by the ongoing struggles for power and the gradual deterioration of the Golden Order itself. This era, which we will term the Age of Fracture, culminates in the default ending of the game, taking place at the very end of the game's timeline during the Golden Order period. It is here, at this critical juncture, that the Tarnished, a warrior exiled from the lands between and now returned, begins their arduous journey to become the Elden Lord. Their path is not linear, but rather a winding odyssey through a fractured world, confronting the demigods who hoard the great runes, fragments of the Elden Ring itself, and facing formidable guardians of the established order. The Tarnished's initial encounters often lead them to the Halleck Tree, a colossal, self-sustaining tree created by Miquella, the Unalloyed, in an attempt to cure his sister, Malenia, Blade of Miquella, of her scarlet rot. It is within the depths of this decaying, yet still vibrant sanctuary that the Tarnished confronts Malenia, a demigod of unparalleled skill and devastating power, whose every strike is imbued with the corrosive essence of the scarlet rot. Her legend precedes her, whispered among those who recall her devastating war with Radon, a conflict that left Caelid a blighted wasteland. Defeating Malenia is not merely a test of combat prowess, but a profound act that culminates in the acquisition of the mending rune of the Great Runes. This particular rune is not a shard of the Elden Ring in the traditional sense, but rather a key to a specific ending, representing the potential for a different kind of order, one that acknowledges and perhaps even embraces the imperfections of the world rather than seeking to erase them. Its presence signifies the Tarnished's growing capacity to influence the very fabric of reality, moving beyond merely reassembling the Elden Ring to actively shaping its future. From the ethereal heights of the Halleck Tree, the Tarnished's journey might lead them into the festering depths of the Mogwin Dynasty Mausoleum, a subterranean realm steeped in blood and blasphemy. Here they face Mog, Lord of Blood, another demigod and brother to Morgott, the Omen King. Mog, driven by a twisted devotion to the outer god of the Formless Mother, a malevolent entity that seeks to engulf all in a sea of blood, abducted Miquella and nurtured him within his cocoon, hoping to raise him to godhood as his consort. His pursuit of this abhorrent ambition makes him a formidable adversary, his attacks wreathed in the power of the Formless Mother, capable of inflicting both physical and spiritual corruption. The defeat of Mog is a significant blow to the forces of chaos, and a crucial step in preventing the rise of a new, terrifying dynasty. His great rune, upon acquisition, represents the power of blood and the insidious influence of outer gods, a stark reminder of the myriad threats that plague the lands between. The path to Elden Lord, also frequently involves a pilgrimage to the Volcano Manor, a fortress carved into the very heart of Mount Gelmir, an active volcano spewing ash and fire. This stronghold is home to Rykard, Lord of Blasphemy, a demigod who, in his insatiable hunger for power, allowed himself to be devoured by the god-devouring serpent. This grotesque fusion transformed him into a monstrous entity, a being dedicated to defying the Golden Order and consuming all who stand in its way. The Volcano Manor itself is a haven for those who reject the Erd Tree's dominion, a sanctuary for blasphemers and conspirators. Confronting Rykard is not a conventional battle. It is a clash against a being that has transcended mortal form, a defiance of the very concept of life and death as understood by the Golden Order. His defeat releases his great rune, a symbol of his blasphemous power and his rejection of the established order, a power that, once claimed, becomes another piece in the Tarnished's growing collection of fragmented divinity. As the Tarnished gathers these powerful relics, their journey invariably leads them to Lanedell, the royal capital, a sprawling metropolis that once served as the heart of the Golden Order. Here, amidst the gilded spires and crumbling grandeur, they confront Morgott, the Omen King, a demigod cursed with the Omen lineage, yet fiercely loyal to the Erd Tree and the Golden Order. Morgott, despite his monstrous appearance, is a tragic figure, one who has dedicated his existence to protecting a system that reviles him. He stands as the last bastion of true loyalty to the Erd Tree, a tireless guardian who has repelled countless invaders. His desperate struggle to maintain the fading glory of the Golden Order makes his defeat particularly poignant. Acquiring his great rune is a symbolic act, a dismantling of the very foundations of the Golden Order, paving the way for a new era. His great rune, imbued with the steadfast, albeit misguided loyalty he possessed, is a testament to the enduring power of conviction, even in the face of inevitable decline. Earlier in their quest, often as one of their first major challenges, the Tarnished would have faced Godric the Grafted in Stormvale Castle, a dilapidated but strategically vital fortress guarding the entrance to Limgrave. Godric, a descendant of Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, is a pathetic and desperate demigod, obsessed with power and lineage. He attempts to bolster his strength by grafting the limbs of defeated warriors onto his own body, a gruesome and ultimately futile endeavor. His grotesque appearance and cowardly nature belie a surprising ferocity in combat as he wields the grotesque power of his grafted appendages. His defeat is often the Tarnished's first taste of victory against a demigod, a crucial step in proving their worthiness to the Two Fingers and the guidance of grace. His great rune, while perhaps the least impressive in terms of raw power, signifies the Tarnished's initial triumph over the fragmented remnants of the Golden lineage and their first tangible step towards becoming Elden Lord. Another early yet pivotal encounter takes place in the Raya Lucarian Academy, a prestigious institution of sorcery nestled in the heart of Liurnia of the Lakes. Here, the Tarnished confronts Rennala, Queen of the Full Moon, a demigod and the former consort of Radagon, who left her to become Marika's second husband. Rennala, though no longer a warrior, possesses immense magical power, capable of rebirthing her loyal students and wielding the power of the full moon. Her sorrow and devotion to her lost love make her a sympathetic figure, but her continued existence as a demigod holding a great rune makes her a necessary obstacle. Her defeat, however, is not a true victory in the traditional sense, as she cannot be truly killed. Instead, the Tarnished merely subdues her, acquiring her great rune, a symbol of wisdom, rebirth, and the enduring power of sorcery. This encounter highlights the complex and often tragic nature of the demigods, not all of whom are inherently malevolent, but all of whom stand in the way of the Tarnished's ultimate goal. Having gathered many of these fragmented powers, the Tarnished's journey takes a dramatic turn, leading them to the crumbling ruins of Farum Azula, a floating city lost in time, existing outside the normal flow of the lands between. This ancient eyrie is the domain of Malekith, the Black Blade, the former shadow of Queen Marika, and the keeper of destined death. For centuries, Malekith has sealed away the rune of death, preventing true death from returning to the lands between, and thus perpetuating the Golden Order's immortality. To progress towards becoming Elden Lord, the Tarnished must confront Malekith and release destined death, an act that has profound and irreversible consequences for the entire world. This battle is a monumental undertaking, a clash against a being of immense power and unwavering loyalty to his sacred duty. His defeat unleashes destined death back into the world, a cataclysmic event that allows the Erd Tree to burn and the path to the Elden Ring to be fully opened. This is not merely a victory, but a fundamental alteration of reality, ushering in an era where true death is once again a possibility. As the Tarnished approaches the culmination of their quest, having navigated treacherous landscapes and defeated powerful demigods, they face their final trials within the ravaged landscape of Leyndell, now the capital of Ash. The once glorious city has been consumed by fire, a testament to the unleashing of destined death and the burning of the Erd Tree. Here, in the ruins of what was once the seat of the Golden Order, the Tarnished confronts Sir Gideon Ofnir, the All-Knowing. Gideon, a fellow Tarnished and a scholar of immense knowledge, initially aided the player, offering guidance and insight. However, his true motivation was to prevent anyone from becoming Elden Lord, believing that such a position was inherently flawed and that the world was better off without a ruling deity. His vast knowledge of the outer gods and the intricate workings of the lands between makes him a formidable intellectual and magical opponent, as he attempts to use every secret he has uncovered to thwart the Tarnished's ascension. His defeat is a symbolic victory over the forces of cynicism and despair, a declaration that even with all the knowledge in the world, the will to forge a new path can overcome even the most formidable intellectual barriers. Finally, within the very heart of the capital of Ash, the Tarnished faces their ultimate test. Godfrey, first Elden Lord, in his true form, Huaralu Warrior. Godfrey, the first consort of Queen Marika and the original Elden Lord, was exiled from the lands between after the Golden Order was established, stripped of his grace, and sent to wage war in the Badlands. Now, as the Tarnished approaches the Elden Throne, Godfrey returns, not as a malicious foe, but as a final monumental challenge, a test of strength and resolve. He embodies the raw, untamed power of a true warrior, a stark contrast to the arcane arts and demigod powers the Tarnished has encountered. His battle is a pure test of combat prowess, a final proving ground for the Tarnished's right to claim the title of Elden Lord. Defeating Godfrey is not merely a physical victory, but a symbolic passing of the torch, a demonstration that the Tarnished possesses the strength, the will, and the unwavering determination to lead the lands between into a new age. This monumental victory against the very first Elden Lord signifies the Tarnished's absolute readiness to claim their destiny. Having overcome Godfrey, The Tarnished now stood before the ultimate threshold, the very heart of the Erd Tree, where Marika's vessel awaited. This was not merely a physical confrontation, but a spiritual and cosmic one, a direct challenge to the established order and the very fabric of the lands between. Within the hallowed, golden-hued chamber, the Tarnished found not Marika herself, but a powerful guardian, a figure intrinsically linked to the Golden Order's inception and its continued dominance. Radagon of the Golden Order, the second husband of Marika and the progenitor of the Golden lineage, stood as the final bulwark. He was a being of immense power, a demigod in his own right, and a devout champion of the greater will. His presence here, defending the shattered remnants of the Elden Ring, underscored his unwavering loyalty to the cosmic entity that had shaped the lands between for millennia. Radagon's very being was intertwined with the Golden Order, his body bearing the marks of its sacred geometry, his magic a pure manifestation of its divine principles. The battle that ensued was a cataclysmic clash of wills and abilities, a testament to the Tarnished's perseverance and the sheer might of Radagon's devotion. Every strike from Radagon was imbued with the power of the Golden Order, his hammer, the Elden Hammer, resonating with the very essence of the Elden Ring he sought to protect. His incantations, born from the fundamentalist tenets of the Golden Order, conjured golden spears and rings of light, seeking to purify and eradicate the Tarnished's defiance. The Tarnished, drawing upon the strength accumulated throughout their arduous journey, from the guidance of Melina to the blessings of the Two Fingers, fought with a ferocity born of purpose. The defeat of Radagon was not merely a physical victory, but a symbolic one, dismantling the last bastion of the Golden Order's direct authority. It signified the breaking of the final chain, the ultimate act of rebellion against the established divine hierarchy. Yet the struggle was far from over. As Radagon fell, his body dissolving into golden motes of light, a new and even more formidable adversary emerged from the very heart of the Erd Tree. This was the Elden Beast, the physical manifestation of the greater will's power, the very entity that had arrived in the lands between millennia ago, carried by the Golden Star, and had since dictated its destiny. The Elden Beast was not a demigod or a mortal, but a cosmic entity, a living embodiment of the Elden Ring itself. Its form was ethereal and majestic, a creature of pure light and cosmic energy, its movements fluid and otherworldly. This was the greater will's ultimate defense, its direct intervention in the affairs of the lands between. The battle against the Elden Beast transcended conventional combat. Its attacks were not mere physical blows, but manifestations of cosmic power, spewing forth golden fire, summoning spectral swords, and warping the very fabric of reality within the Erd Tree's hallowed chamber. Each strike from the beast was a reminder of the greater will's immense and pervasive influence, its ability to shape existence itself. The Tarnished, now facing the source of all the lands between's woes and wonders, had to draw upon every ounce of strength, every learned skill, and every blessing bestowed upon them. The defeat of the Elden Beast was the ultimate act of defiance against the greater will. It was a declaration of independence, a severing of the cosmic umbilical cord that had bound the lands between to an external, unseen deity. With the Elden Beast vanquished, the greater will's direct influence over the lands between was effectively broken, its physical avatar shattered. With both Radagon and the Elden Beast defeated, the path to the fractured Elden Ring lay open. The Tarnished approached the remnants of the cosmic artifact, now lying exposed within the Erd Tree's chamber. The Elden Ring, once a complete and perfect circle, was now a fragmented mess of runes, each representing a fundamental aspect of the world. Destined Death, the Rune of Death, the Rune of the Fell God, and countless others. These shards, though broken, still pulsed with immense power, awaiting a guiding hand to reforge them. The act of mending the Elden Ring was not a simple repair, but a profound act of cosmic scarce reconstruction. The Tarnished, having gathered various great runes throughout their journey, possessed the key elements necessary to begin this monumental task. Each great rune, once a part of the Elden Ring, held a piece of its original power and purpose. By carefully placing these runes back into their rightful positions, guided by the wisdom of Marika's words and the insight gained from their trials, the Tarnished began to restore the Elden Ring to its former glory. As the runes reconnected, a surge of golden light emanated from the ring, filling the Erdtree chamber with a radiant glow. The fractures began to seal, the broken pieces rejoining, until the Elden Ring once again formed a complete, albeit subtly altered circle. Despite this monumental act of cosmic restoration, the immediate outward appearance of the world remained largely unchanged. The devastating effects of the shattering, the lingering scars of the war, and the widespread suffering of the inhabitants of the lands between did not magically vanish. The Golden Order, though its direct defenders had been vanquished, was not entirely eradicated. Its principles, its institutions, and its pervasive influence had been deeply ingrained in the fabric of society for millennia. The mending of the Elden Ring primarily signified a restoration of the foundational laws and order that governed the lands between, rather than an immediate societal overhaul. It was a reestablishment of the cosmic framework, a reassertion of a central authority, but not a sudden paradise. The lingering effects of the Scarlet Rot, the despair of the common folk, and the presence of various hostile factions still persisted. The restoration of the Elden Ring meant that the laws of causality, life, and death were once again properly defined, ending the chaotic age brought about by the shattering. With the Elden Ring mended, the Golden Order in its fundamental form was restored. However, it was a Golden Order with a new sovereign. The Tarnished, having overcome every obstacle and reforged the very laws of the world, now stood as the rightful heir to the Elden Throne. This was not a revolution, but a succession, a continuation of the established order under new management. The Tarnished, by virtue of their triumph, became the new Elden Lord, ascending to the highest position of power in the lands between. This ascension was not merely a political appointment, but a divine mandate, recognized by the very cosmos itself through the mending of the Elden Ring. The Tarnished, once a nameless exile, now sat upon the Elden Throne, the seat of power within the Erdtree, surrounded by the golden light of the restored Elden Ring. This act solidified their claim, marking the beginning of a new era under their rule. This ending, often referred to as the Age of Fracture or the default ending, represents a continuation of the existing order, albeit with a new sovereign. It is a re-establishment of the status quo, a return to a semblance of stability after the chaos of the shattering. The fundamental principles of the Golden Order, such as the cycle of life and death, now properly regulated by the restored Destined Death, and the influence of the Erdtree, remain largely intact. The Tarnished, as Elden Lord, becomes the ultimate arbiter of these laws, the new shepherd of the lands between. This ending signifies a return to a structured, if not necessarily benevolent, governance. It suggests that while the individual at the helm has changed, the underlying system of cosmic law and divine authority persists. The lands between, under the new Elden Lord, enters an era of renewed stability, guided by the principles of the Golden Order, now reinforced by a new, powerful ruler. It is a future where the world, though scarred, continues its journey under a familiar, if perhaps subtly altered, cosmic framework. Having just outlined the grim, unchanging stasis of the Age of Fracture, we now pivot as the on screen timeline bar shifts to an alternative path taken at the very same pivotal moment, the game end, or more precisely, the moment of death for the final bosses, which ushers in the Age of Duskborn. This era, born from the ambitions of a deathbed companion and the choices of the tarnished, represents a profound redefinition of life and death in the lands between, a stark contrast to the stagnant eternity of the default ending. Our narrative begins, as all endings do, with the ultimate triumph of the tarnished. Following a grueling and arduous journey through a shattered land marked by countless battles and profound discoveries, the Tarnished confronts the final bastions of the Golden Order's power. Within the burning heart of the Erd Tree, the colossal luminous tree that dominates the landscape and symbolizes the divine order, the Tarnished faces Radagon of the Golden Order. This enigmatic figure, Marika's other half and a powerful champion of the Erd Tree, is a formidable foe, embodying the fractured will of the greater will, the outer god that governs the lands between. Radagon's defeat is not the end, however, as the true final challenge emerges from his broken form, the Elden Beast. This ethereal cosmic entity, a vassal of the greater will itself, is the physical manifestation of the Elden Ring, the fundamental concept of order that governs all reality in this world. Its defeat signifies the complete dismantling of the established divine authority, leaving a void where the old order once stood. With both Radagon and the Elden Beast vanquished, the path is clear for the Tarnished to assume the mantle of Elden Lord, a title that carries with it the power to reshape the very fabric of existence. But unlike the default ending, where the Tarnished simply reestablishes a broken order, the Age of Duskborn is shaped by a prior, deeply personal quest. While the Tarnished was battling gods and demigods, another more subtle drama was unfolding, orchestrated by Fia, the deathbed companion. Fia, a mysterious woman encountered early in the journey at the Round Table Hold, a sanctuary for Tarnished, harbors a profound and forbidden desire to bring true peace to those who live in death. These are individuals, animated by a form of undeath, whose souls have been denied the natural cycle of life and death by the absence of destined death, the true power of mortality. Fia's purpose, meticulously pursued throughout her complex questline, culminates in the birthing of the mending rune of the Death Prince. This isn't merely a symbolic act, it's a creation of immense cosmic significance. The mending rune is a fragment of the Elden Ring, imbued with a specific principle, and in this case, it carries the essence of what Fia believes is true death. A death that allows for repose and integration rather than eternal suffering or mindless animation. Fia's motivations are crucial to understanding this ending. She is not a malevolent figure, nor is she seeking chaos. Instead, her actions are driven by a deep empathy for those who live in death, a marginalized and often persecuted group within the lands between. The Golden Order, in its pursuit of eternal life and its sealing away of destined death, effectively condemned these individuals to a tortured existence, neither truly alive nor truly dead. Fia believes that by reintroducing a proper form of death, a death that allows for a peaceful transition, she can grant these beings true solace and, crucially, a legitimate place within the societal structure of the Golden Order. Her vision is not to destroy the Order, but to fundamentally alter its understanding of life and death, integrating mortality as a natural and even sacred component of existence. She sees the current state of affairs as a cruel injustice, a denial of a fundamental aspect of the natural world, and her quest is a radical act of compassion. The Tarnished, having delved into Fia's questline, assisted her in her esoteric rituals and understood her profound purpose, ultimately comes into possession of this newly birthed mending rune of the Death Prince. This possession is not accidental. It is the culmination of a series of choices made by you, the player, to support Fia's vision, to delve into the secrets of undeath and the nature of true mortality. You have witnessed the plight of those who live in death, perhaps even encountered their tragic forms, and through Fia, you have been offered a solution, a way to mend not just the Elden Ring, but the very concept of death itself. This mending rune, a powerful and unique artifact, now represents the key to enacting a new order, one that embraces mortality rather than shuns it. With the mending rune in hand, and the cosmic entities of the Elden Beast and Radagon defeated, the Tarnished approaches the fractured Elden Ring. This isn't a physical object in the traditional sense, but rather a conceptual framework, a divine blueprint that governs reality. It appears as a great, shattered circle of light, pulsing with immense power, located within the depths of the now exposed Erd Tree. The Erd Tree itself, once a symbol of unyielding life and the Golden Order's eternal dominion, now stands scarred and vulnerable, its protective shell breached by the Tarnished's relentless assault. The air here crackles with residual divine energy, a testament to the monumental struggle that has just transpired. This is the moment of ultimate choice, the point where the Tarnished, as the newly appointed Elden Lord, will imprint their will upon the very fabric of the world. The Tarnished, guided by Fia's vision and armed with the mending rune of the Death Prince, then uses this powerful artifact to mend the Elden Ring. This act is not about simply repairing the existing order. It is about fundamentally altering its principles. The mending rune, containing the very essence of destined death, is integrated into the Elden Ring. This isn't a mere addition, it's a recomposition, a rewriting of the foundational rules of existence. Imagine a complex algorithm, and the mending rune is a crucial new line of code, altering how the entire program functions. The implications are immediate and profound, echoing through the very fabric of the lands between. The most significant consequence of this integration is that the rune of death, previously sealed away by Queen Marika and the Golden Order, is no longer suppressed. For ages, destined death, the true power of mortality that brings about genuine cessation of life, had been locked away within Malekith, the Black Blade. This act, while intended to prevent death and usher in an age of eternal life, inadvertently led to the proliferation of those who live in death and a stagnation of the natural cycle. Now, with the mending rune of the Death Prince integrated into the Elden Ring, the power of true death is unleashed once more. It is not a chaotic, uncontrolled release, but rather a reestablishment of a natural order. Death returns to the lands between, not as a destructive force, but as an integral part of life's cycle, allowing beings to truly pass on and find peace. This reintroduction of destined death fundamentally alters the Golden Order. The Golden Order, as it existed, was predicated on the denial of death, on the pursuit of an eternal, unchanging existence. Its tenets, its rituals, and its very understanding of divinity were built around this principle. With death now an inherent part of the Elden Ring, the Golden Order can no longer maintain its rigid, death denying ideology. It is forced to adapt, to incorporate mortality into its understanding of the divine. This isn't necessarily the destruction of the Golden Order, but rather its profound transformation. It becomes an order that acknowledges and even embraces death as a natural and necessary component of existence, moving from an age of eternal, stagnant life to an age where life and death dance in a perpetual, harmonious cycle. This is the dawn of the Age of Duskborn, an era where the boundary between life and death blurs, and those who live in death finally find their place within a newly defined cosmos. With the Prince of Death now truly at peace, a profound shift ripples across the lands between. The very concept of undeath, which had plagued the world since the Night of Black Knives, begins to unravel. The curse that bound those who live in death, the miserable, shambling remnants of souls denied their final rest, is lifted. These unfortunate beings, previously ostracized, hunted, and reviled, are finally granted the solace they so desperately sought. Their agonizing existence, trapped between life and death, ceases. The spectral figures that haunted the catacombs, the skeletal warriors endlessly reanimating, the grotesque creatures born of incomplete demise, all find their ultimate cessation. No longer are they condemned to a half-life of suffering and decay. Their tormented forms dissipate, their lingering spirits finally allowed to journey to whatever afterlife awaits them, or simply to dissolve into the ether, free from the burden of their unnatural animation. This is not merely a cessation of suffering for individuals, but a fundamental reordering of the cosmic principles governing life and death within the lands between. This radical change extends even to the most prominent victim of this twisted undeath, Godwyn the Golden himself. The first to die a true death, yet simultaneously robbed of a true end, Godwyn's colossal corrupted corpse had become the very root of the death blight infection, a festering blight upon the Erd tree and the land. For ages, his soulless body, a grotesque monument to a broken system, lay buried beneath the capital, radiating an insidious influence that spawned countless undead horrors. Now, with the reestablishment of true death, Godwyn, the Prince of Death, is finally able to rest. His corrupted form, no longer a source of eternal suffering and decay, begins to heal, to decompose naturally, or perhaps to simply fade from existence as his spirit is finally freed. The profound tragedy of his demise, which had set in motion so much of the world's suffering, is at last brought to a peaceful conclusion. His sacrifice, albeit unwitting, ultimately paves the way for a more benevolent order. The implications of this new age are far-reaching, touching every corner of the lands between, and every creature touched by the previous imbalance. The soulless demigods, those unfortunate scions of Marika and Radagon who met their end without truly dying, their spirits lingering as grotesque mockeries of their former selves, can now experience a proper end. Consider Godric the Grafted, whose ambition and fear led him to fuse himself with countless limbs, a desperate attempt to stave off his own inevitable demise. Or perhaps even the lingering consciousness within the great runes themselves, which held fragments of these demigods' very essence. These beings, once trapped in a purgatorial state, are released from their eternal stasis. Furthermore, countless other undead creatures, from the lowliest skeleton to the most formidable revenant, are granted the same mercy. The spectral figures that emerge from graves, the reanimated soldiers of forgotten wars, the grotesque Fia's champions who sought to protect her ritual, all find their final peace. This is not an act of destruction, but of liberation, freeing them from the unending torment of their unnatural existence. The lands between are cleansed, not by fire or sword, but by the restoration of a fundamental truth. This ending, the Age of Duskborn, establishes a new order where death is no longer denied, but embraced as a natural, essential part of life. For centuries, the Golden Order, under the influence of Queen Marika and the Greater Will, had sought to eradicate death from the cycle of existence. The Rune of Death, once a fundamental component of the Elden Ring, was removed, sealed away, and its power suppressed. This denial of death, however, did not eliminate it, but rather corrupted it, twisting it into the Death Blight, a festering disease that plagued the land and created the wretched those who live in death. The Age of Duskborn rectifies this profound imbalance. It acknowledges that death is not an enemy to be conquered, but a vital component of the cosmic tapestry, a necessary conclusion that allows for new beginnings. It is an acceptance of the natural order, a recognition that life and death are two sides of the same coin, inseparable and interdependent. This new philosophy permeates the very fabric of the world, shifting the collective consciousness of its inhabitants. Fear of death, once a pervasive terror, is replaced by a more nuanced understanding, a somber acceptance of its inevitability and its role in the grand design. Consequently, the cycle of life and death is restored to the lands between. Before the Golden Order's intervention, the Erd Tree, in its original form, likely served as a conduit for souls, allowing them to return to its embrace upon death, perhaps to be reborn or to nourish the very essence of the world. The removal of the Rune of Death disrupted this natural flow, creating a stagnant, corrupted system where souls could neither truly die nor truly live. The Age of Duskborn, by integrating the Rune of Death, or rather the mending rune of the Death Prince, back into the Elden Ring, reestablishes this vital cycle. Souls can now pass beyond the veil, finding their true rest, and perhaps contributing to the continued flourishing of the lands between in ways yet to be fully understood. The Erd Tree, no longer a symbol of arrested development and false immortality, can resume its intended function as a beacon of life and a gateway to the afterlife. This restoration brings a profound sense of balance and harmony to the world, a return to a natural order that had been violently disrupted for millennia. In this transformative era, the tarnished, you who embarked on this arduous journey, become the Elden Lord of this new, more inclusive order. Your ascension to the throne is not merely a triumph of strength, but a testament to your understanding and acceptance of a fundamental truth that the previous rulers had denied. You, who allied with Fia, the deathbed companion, and championed the cause of those who live in death, are uniquely positioned to lead this new age. Your reign is not one of absolute power and rigid dogma, but one of understanding, compassion, and the integration of all aspects of existence, even those previously deemed anathema. You embody the spirit of the Age of Duskborn, presiding over a realm where death is no longer feared, but understood as a natural, even sacred process. Your rule signifies a departure from the oppressive, life-denying tenets of the Golden Order, ushering in an era of genuine renewal and reconciliation. Thus begins the Age of Duskborn, an era characterized by the acceptance and integration of death. It is an age where the shadows are acknowledged as much as the light, where the cycle of existence is honored in its entirety. The lands between, once a realm of eternal twilight and lingering suffering, are now bathed in a new kind of dawn, a dusk-born light that acknowledges the beauty and necessity of both life and its inevitable end. This is not a grim or morbid age, but one of profound peace, born from the understanding that true immortality lies not in the denial of death, but in its harmonious integration into the grand design. The lingering sorrow of the past generations, those who suffered under the false promise of eternal life, finally dissipates, replaced by a quiet sense of resolution and hope for a future where all beings, living and dead, find their rightful place. The Elden Ring, now mended with the rune of the Death Prince, reflects this new cosmic truth, a symbol of a world finally at peace with itself. Having just explored the melancholic embrace of the Age of Duskborn, where the Tarnished ushered in a new era defined by the acceptance of death through the mending rune of the Death Prince, we now shift our gaze to a significantly more unsettling outcome, one that unfolds at the very same pivotal moment in the Lands Between's history, the game end, marked by a pervasive curse. This is the blessing of despair, the culmination of the Dung Eater's horrifying ambition. In this particular timeline, the Tarnished, after a grueling odyssey through the shattered landscape, finally confronts and defeats the Elden Beast, the physical manifestation of the Elden Ring and the greater will's influence in the lands between. This monumental victory, a testament to the Tarnished's unwavering resolve and martial prowess, once again leaves the fate of the world in their hands. However, the path taken to reach this point and the choices made along the way diverge drastically from other timelines. Specifically, this Tarnished has at some earlier point encountered a figure whose very existence is anathema to the established order, the Dung Eater. The Dung Eater, a notorious defiler of souls and bodies, is not merely a grotesque serial killer, but a harbinger of a deeper, more insidious curse. His moniker, while crude, accurately reflects his abhorrent practices, which involve the ritualistic defilement of corpses, particularly those of the omens, leaving behind a lingering spiritual blight. This encounter with the Dung Eater is crucial, as it is through this interaction that the Tarnished obtains the mending rune of the fell curse. This particular mending rune, unlike others that seek to restore or refine the Elden Ring, is designed to utterly corrupt it, to fundamentally alter the very fabric of existence in the lands between. The Dung Eater's entire philosophy, his twisted vision for the future, revolves around the spread of his unique curse. He actively sought to inflict this blight upon every living being in the lands between, transforming them into reflections of his own defiled nature. His motivations, while seemingly born of pure malice, are rooted in a deep-seated and understandable hatred for the Golden Order, the dominant religious and political power in the lands between, and its systemic, brutal treatment of the Omen. The Omen are a tragically cursed lineage within the lands between, born with horns, scales, and other grotesque deformities. They are seen as an affront to the Golden Order's pristine ideals. From birth, they are subjected to horrific cruelty. Their horns are often severed, a process that is both agonizing and frequently fatal, or they are cast out and imprisoned in the darkest, most forgotten corners of the world, such as the subterranean shunning grounds beneath Leyndell royal capital. These individuals, despite being born innocent, are condemned to a life of suffering and ostracization, their very existence a stain on the Golden Order's carefully constructed facade of perfection. Morgoth, the Omen King, and Mohg, Lord of Blood, are prime examples of the Omen's tragic fate, though they each reacted to their curse in vastly different ways, one attempting to uphold the very order that reviled him, the other seeking to create his own dominion. The Dung Eater, witnessing and perhaps even experiencing firsthand the plight of the Omen, developed a radical and horrifying solution to their suffering. He believes that by spreading his curse, by making everyone an omen, the curse itself would lose its power. If all of humanity, indeed all of life, were to bear the marks of the omen, if the entire population were to be defiled and deformed, then the concept of being cursed would become meaningless. It would simply be the new normal. In his twisted logic, universal suffering would equate to no suffering at all, or at least no longer a source of discrimination. He envisioned a world where the Golden Order's arbitrary distinctions and cruel judgments would be rendered obsolete, replaced by a universal, unifying blight. This is his blessing of despair. The mending rune of the Fell Curse is not merely a symbolic item. It is a physical manifestation of the Dung Eater's profound defilement and his unwavering desire to curse all life. This rune is imbued with the very essence of his blight, a spiritual contagion that seeps into the soul and body, transforming the afflicted into a grotesque parody of their former selves, bearing the telltale signs of the omen. It represents the ultimate rejection of the Golden Order's ideals of purity and perfection, a deliberate embrace of the grotesque and the reviled. Having chosen to align with the Dung Eater's abhorrent vision, a decision that speaks volumes about the Tarnished's own disillusionment, or perhaps a perverse sense of justice, the Tarnished then utilizes the mending rune of the Fell Curse. This act, performed at the fractured heart of the Elden Ring, is the culmination of the Dung Eater's plan. The Tarnished, now the Elden Lord, does not merely mend the Elden Ring in the traditional sense, nor do they introduce a new concept like death or a new cosmic order. Instead, they infuse the Elden Ring with the very essence of the Dung Eater's curse. The cosmic laws governing the lands between, once dictated by the Greater Will's Golden Order, are now fundamentally rewritten. This act of mending, or rather unmending, the Elden Ring with the mending rune of the Fell Curse, does not bring about an age of renewal or peace. Instead, it ushers in an era of universal defilement. The very fabric of existence is warped, and the curse of the omen is no longer confined to a marginalized few. It becomes a fundamental aspect of life in the lands between. The world, once scarred by the shattering, is now irrevocably blighted by a spiritual and physical contagion, a testament to the Dung Eater's horrifying triumph. This is the beginning of the blessing of despair, where every soul is touched by the Fell Curse, and the concept of normal is redefined by widespread deformity and spiritual decay. The very fabric of reality, once woven with the threads of the Golden Order's dominion, now unravels and reweaves itself under the influence of this defiling rune. The mending of the Elden Ring, the cosmic governing force of the lands between, with the mending rune of the Fell Curse, fundamentally alters the world at its most foundational level. This isn't merely a change in governance or a shift in the balance of power, but a metaphysical transformation, a redefinition of existence itself. The curse of the omen, once confined to the subterranean depths and the marginalized, is no longer an anomaly but the new norm. The dung eater's defilement, his twisted vision of universal suffering, spreads like a virulent plague, not through airborne contagion, but through the very essence of the reforged Elden Ring. This curse is not a simple physical affliction, a mere skin disease, or a debilitating ailment. It is a spiritual and existential defilement, a corruption of the soul and the very nature of being. The omen, as we understand them, were born with horns and other grotesque features, a mark of their perceived impurity and a source of their persecution by the Golden Order. This new curse, however, goes far beyond superficial deformities. It is a deep-seated corruption that permeates the spirit, twisting the inner self as much as the outer form. Imagine the profound despair, the existential horror of waking to find your very essence, your soul, tainted and transformed into something abhorrent, something that reflects the inner darkness of the dung eater himself. This is the fate that now befalls the inhabitants of the lands between. All life, without exception, is afflicted by this curse. From the humblest of creatures to the most powerful demigods, from the ethereal spirits of the Erd tree to the hardy denizens of the mountain tops of the giants, none are spared. They become omen-like beings, not necessarily identical to the original omen, but sharing their fundamental characteristic of being marked by a grotesque, defiling corruption. The once beautiful landscapes, renowned for their majesty and diverse ecosystems, are transformed into grotesque, cursed forms. The shimmering waters of Lurnaya of the lakes, once reflecting the serene sky, now mirror distorted, corrupted visages. The vibrant flora of the Weeping Peninsula withers and twists into thorny, diseased growths. The very stones of the ancient ruins groan under the weight of this new, pervasive defilement, their surfaces erupting with horn-like protrusions or festering with unholy blight. The diverse inhabitants, once a tapestry of cultures and species, from the graceful Carian knights to the stoic Crucible knights, from the scholarly Raya Lucarian sorcerers to the fierce fire giants, are all reduced to this uniform state of defiled existence. Their unique characteristics, their individual identities, are subsumed by the overwhelming presence of the curse, their forms warped into grotesque parodies of their former selves. The once proud lineage of Godfrey's warriors, the noble blood of Marika's children, all become equally tainted, their strength and beauty replaced by the universal blight. The Golden Order, with its foundational ideals of purity, order, and the eradication of anything deemed unclean, is not merely challenged or diminished. It is utterly subverted and destroyed. Its entire worldview, its theological framework, is rendered meaningless in a world where purity no longer exists, where order is replaced by universal chaos born of defilement. The very concepts it championed, the very values it sought to uphold, are obliterated by the pervasive reality of the curse. The Erd tree, once a symbol of the Golden Order's divine grace and power, might itself become a grotesque monument to this new age, its golden leaves replaced by blighted foliage, its sacred sap oozing with corruption. The two fingers, the envoys of the greater will, would find their pronouncements of divine will rendered absurd in a world where every living thing is an abomination in the eyes of their supposed deity. Their very existence would be a cruel mockery, their purpose rendered null and void. The faith that once bound the lands between together, however imperfectly, would shatter, replaced by an all-encompassing despair and a grim acceptance of their shared, cursed fate. The institutions of the Golden Order, from the Round Table Hold to the various churches and cathedrals, would either crumble into ruin or be repurposed as morbid temples to this new, defiled reality. This ending plunges the entire world into an age of universal despair and defilement. There is no hope for redemption, no path to purification, for the very source of life itself has been corrupted. The concept of grace, so central to the tarnished's journey, becomes a cruel joke, as all are now equally graceless, equally damned. The air itself might hang heavy with the stench of decay and spiritual corruption, a constant reminder of the world's fallen state. The sun, if it still shines, would cast long, distorted shadows, reflecting the pervasive ugliness that has consumed everything. Laughter would be replaced by moans, joy by agony, and ambition by a grim resignation to their shared inescapable fate. The cycle of rebirth and death, once a fundamental aspect of the Erd Tree's grace, would be utterly perverted, perhaps leading to endless cycles of cursed existence, or a final, agonizing stagnation. The new Elden Lord, the tarnished, you, now presides over a world where all are equally cursed. This is not a kingdom of prosperity or peace, but a dominion of shared suffering. The crown you wear is not one of glory, but of universal defilement. You sit upon a throne built not of power, but of the collective misery of an entire world. In this grim reality, the Dung Eater's twisted vision of equality is fulfilled. He sought to make everyone suffer as he did, to spread his curse until all were equally defiled, equally outcast. And in this ending, he has achieved precisely that. There is no hierarchy of suffering, no privileged few who escape the blight. Every man, woman, and child, every beast and spirit is now a grotesque reflection of the Dung Eater's inner torment. You, the Elden Lord, become the unwitting, or perhaps willing instrument of his ultimate triumph, reigning over a world where the only true equality is the equality of universal damnation. Your reign is not one of salvation, but of the final irreversible descent into an age of absolute and unending despair. And so, we arrive at the sixth entry on our timeline, an outcome born from profound contemplation and the pursuit of truth, the Age of Order. This era begins at the very end of your journey, the game's conclusion, specifically when the perfect order is established. It is a direct continuation from the previous entry, where the path to this specific ending was forged through the Tarnished's dedication to Goldmask's philosophy. The culmination of your arduous quest, regardless of the chosen path, always begins with a titanic confrontation. You, the Tarnished, stand before the Elden Beast, the physical manifestation of the Greater Will's power. This cosmic entity, a colossal, ethereal creature resembling a winged serpent, is not merely a guardian, but an extension of the outer god itself, infused with the very essence of the Elden Ring. Its defeat is a symbolic act, severing the direct physical tether between the greater will and the lands between. With each blow struck against its shimmering form, you are not just vanquishing a foe, but dismantling the very foundation of the divine authority that has dictated reality for millennia. The Elden Beast's defeat signifies the end of the Greater Will's overt, direct control, paving the way for a new dawn, or perhaps a new twilight. Following this monumental victory, the fate of Marika, and by extension Radagon, is sealed. Within the fractured husk of the Erd Tree, you encounter Marika's body, which, as we've discussed, contains the tormented form of Radagon. This dual entity, the vessel of the Elden Ring and the puppet of the Greater Will, is shattered. This act is more than just the slaying of a queen or a king. It is the definitive end of the current Elden Lord's reign, a reign that began with the Golden Order's establishment and has persisted through countless ages of stagnation and suffering. The destruction of Marika Radagon is the final, irreversible step in dismantling the old regime, leaving a void at the heart of the lands between, a void that you, the Tarnished, are poised to fill. The shattered remains of the former deity are not merely a consequence of battle, but a necessary prerequisite for any true change. For so long as Marika and Radagon held the Elden Ring, their will, or rather, the Greater Will's will, would continue to dominate. With the old order irrevocably broken, your attention turns to the means of forging a new one. You retrieve the mending rune of perfect order from the corpse of Goldmask, the enigmatic scholar who dedicated his life to uncovering the flaws of the Golden Order. Goldmask, a silent observer and profound thinker, is found in the final moments of his existence, having completed his life's work. He lies motionless, his body a testament to his unwavering intellectual pursuit, his mind having finally grasped the ultimate truth about the Golden Order's imperfections. His death is not one of despair, but of quiet triumph, his final contemplation having yielded the ultimate solution. The mending rune, imbued with his profound understanding, is the culmination of his life's sacrifice, a sacrifice made not on a battlefield, but in the quiet chambers of his mind. He gave everything, even his life, to provide the key to a new order, an order free from the very contradictions that consumed him. This rune is not merely an object, it is the crystallized wisdom of a lifetime spent dissecting divine dogma, a testament to the power of human intellect to transcend even the will of gods. Goldmask's final act of self-sacrifice and intellectual pursuit provides the key to a new order, a testament to the idea that even in a world dominated by divine power, mortal wisdom can carve a path forward. His journey, meticulously documented by his faithful companion, Brother Corin, reveals the inherent contradictions within the Golden Order's tenets. Corin, a devout finger reader, initially followed Goldmask out of curiosity and a desire to understand the scholar's silent wisdom. As they traversed the lands between, from the Altus Plateau to the very foot of the Erd Tree, Corin witnessed Goldmask's relentless deconstruction of the Golden Order's dogma. He saw how the Order, despite its claims of perfection, was riddled with inconsistencies, particularly its intolerance towards anything that deviated from its rigid interpretation of the greater will. The persecution of those who wielded death, or those born with different forms, like the omens, was a stark example of this hypocrisy. Goldmask's silent lessons, interpreted and relayed by Corin, exposed the Golden Order not as a benevolent, all-encompassing truth, but as a flawed, man-made, or demigod-made construct designed to maintain power and suppress dissent. Corin's initial reverence for the Golden Order slowly transformed into a nuanced understanding, recognizing its inherent limitations and the suffering it caused. His journey with Goldmask is a parallel narrative to your own, a journey of disillusionment leading to enlightenment, highlighting the intellectual and spiritual cost of challenging established dogma. With the mending rune of perfect order in hand, you, the Tarnished, approach the fractured Elden Ring at the Erd Tree's base. The Elden Ring, no longer whole, no longer a symbol of absolute divine authority, now lies exposed, its power vulnerable to intervention. This is the moment of ultimate consequence, the point where the fate of the lands between is truly decided. The mending rune of perfect order, imbued with Goldmask's profound insight and the intellectual rigor that defined his existence, is then applied to the Elden Ring. This is not a simple repair, but a fundamental recalibration, a rewriting of the very laws that govern reality. It is a surgical strike against the foundational principles that have caused so much strife. The application of this rune initiates a profound transformation. The flaws and inconsistencies of the Golden Order, particularly its dogmatic inflexibility and reliance on a single deity, are purged. This purging is not a violent upheaval, but a sophisticated reordering, a philosophical correction embedded within the very fabric of existence. The Golden Order's inability to reconcile concepts like destined death, its suppression of those who did not conform to its narrow definition of life and grace, and its unwavering faith in a singular, unquestionable divine will are all systematically addressed. The mending rune acts as a cosmic debugger, identifying and eliminating the bugs in the system, the contradictions that led to the shattering, and the subsequent decay of the lands between. Crucially, the concept of an absolute, unchanging divine, while dictating all existence, is removed from the Elden Ring's influence. This does not mean the greater will ceases to exist, or that outer gods lose all power. Instead, it signifies that the Elden Ring, the ultimate arbiter of reality in the lands between, will no longer be a direct conduit for the greater will's absolute decrees. The new order, the Age of Order, establishes a system where divine influence is moderated, where the laws of the world are no longer solely dictated by the whims of an unseen distant deity. It creates a space for nuance, for individual agency, and for a more balanced, less dogmatic interpretation of existence. The rigidity that led to so much suffering is replaced by a more adaptable, more perfect order, an order that acknowledges the complexities of life and the inherent imperfections of even divine constructs. This is a subtle, yet seismic shift, moving the lands between from a state of divine tyranny to one of carefully calibrated cosmic balance, a balance achieved through the intellectual sacrifice of Goldmask. This new Elden Lord, the tarnished protagonist you embody, does not rule by divine right or personal charisma. Instead, they become the living embodiment of the newly perfected Golden Order. This is not the Golden Order of Marika, flawed and contradictory, but a purified absolute version. The title of Elden Lord, once a symbol of divine favor and martial prowess, is now redefined. It signifies the ultimate arbiter of this unfeeling law, a figurehead who ensures the cosmic scales remain perfectly balanced. The very nature of governance shifts from a monarchy influenced by fickle gods and ambitious demigods to a dispassionate bureaucracy where decisions are made not by emotion or personal gain, but by the strict application of immutable principles. Imagine a world where every action, every thought even, is weighed against an unyielding code, and consequences are meted out with absolute, unwavering precision. This is the realm over which the new Elden Lord presides, a realm where the concept of mercy is anathema to the pursuit of perfect order. The establishment of this new Elden Lord signifies a profound shift in the very fabric of the lands between. The previous cycle of demigod conflict, fueled by their divine heritage and often their personal ambitions, is brought to a definitive end. No longer can Millennia, the blade of Miquella, wage war for her brother, or Radon, the Star Scourge, hold the stars in defiance. Their power, once derived from their status as children of Marika and inheritors of the Elden Ring's influence, is now rendered irrelevant in the face of this absolute order. The very concept of a demigod as a uniquely powerful and influential being is dissolved. They are, like all others, subject to the unfeeling laws of the perfected Golden Order. Their divine blood, once a source of both power and strife, becomes a mere biological footnote, stripped of its political or cosmic significance. This severance from divine influence means that future generations will not be born with the inherent advantages or disadvantages of divine lineage, effectively leveling the playing field in a way that the previous Golden Order, with its emphasis on the royal lineage, could never achieve. The potential for future divine manipulation, whether from the greater will or other outer gods, is also meticulously prevented. The Elden Ring, now reforged with the rune of perfect order, acts as a cosmic firewall, actively repelling any attempts at external interference. It's a shield, not just against the chaotic impulses of the outer gods, but also against the subtle, often insidious influence of the greater will itself. This means that the lands between are truly, for the first time, self-governing, free from the puppetry of cosmic entities. This ending establishes a cold, unfeeling, but perfectly ordered world, a stark contrast to the vibrant, chaotic, and often tragic lands between we experienced. The warmth of human connection, the fire of ambition, the agony of loss, all these emotional complexities that define mortal existence are not necessarily eradicated, but they are certainly relegated to the periphery. In this world, the pursuit of individual happiness or personal fulfillment takes a backseat to the overarching principle of cosmic equilibrium. Imagine a society where every cog in the machine functions flawlessly, but the machine itself has no soul. The beauty of the landscape, the intricate architecture of the cities, even the very cycle of life and death, all continue, but they do so under the shadow of an absolute, unwavering law. This is a world free from divine meddling, but also potentially free from the spontaneous joy and unpredictable beauty that often arise from such interference. The absence of divine caprice also means the absence of divine miracles, of sudden, unexplained blessings or curses. Everything operates according to a predictable, logical framework, leaving no room for the inexplicable. The unpredictable nature of free will, a concept often celebrated in other narratives, is here replaced by a rigid, logical framework. Mortals are left to their own devices, but these devices are now guided, indeed constrained, by an immutable, impersonal law. This isn't to say that free will is entirely abolished, but its scope is severely limited. Choices are still made, but the consequences of those choices are predetermined by the absolute rules of the perfected Golden Order. Imagine a chess game where every move is dictated by a pre-written algorithm, leaving no room for improvisation or creative strategy. This is the essence of existence under the Age of Order. The whims of individuals, the passions that drive humanity, are all subsumed by the greater need for cosmic stability. There is no room for rebellion, no possibility of challenging the established order, because the order itself is perfect and unassailable. The law isn't just a set of rules, it's the very air they breathe, the ground they walk on, an omnipresent force that shapes every aspect of their reality. The Golden Order's original intent, as conceived by Queen Marika and her disciples, was to create a stable, unchanging world. They sought to establish a cosmic order that would endure, free from the chaos and uncertainty that preceded it. However, their efforts were ultimately flawed. Marika's own contradictions, her hidden desires, and the inherent limitations of her understanding of the cosmos led to a golden order riddled with inconsistencies and inherent instability. The Age of Order, however, realizes this original intent, but without its inherent contradictions or divine oversight. It is the Golden Order perfected, stripped of its human and divine imperfections. The internal conflicts that plagued the original Golden Order, such as the persecution of those who worshipped other outer gods, or the inherent tension between the Golden Order's belief in an unchanging world and the natural cycle of life and death, are all resolved. They are resolved not through compromise or understanding, but through the absolute imposition of a singular, unyielding truth. This is a world where the Golden Order is not merely a dominant religion or a political system, but the fundamental operating principle of reality itself. It is the ultimate triumph of logic and structure over chaos and emotion, a testament to Goldmask's unwavering pursuit of a flawless, unblemished truth. The lands between, under this new regime, become a perfectly calibrated machine, operating with unparalleled efficiency, but perhaps at the cost of its very soul. Transitioning from the Age of Order, where the Golden Order's rigid doctrines were reaffirmed, we now explore a path that radically redefines the very fabric of the lands between. This brings us to the Age of the Stars Aegis, Ranni's ending, unfolding at the game's conclusion, specifically at the moment of the Elden Ring's repair, or rather, its fundamental alteration. For this outcome to manifest, the player, the Tarnished, must have embarked on a very specific and intricate questline, one that begins long before the final confrontation with the Elden Beast. This journey involves pledging allegiance to Ranni the Witch, an Empyrean, one of the demigods chosen by the Greater Will to potentially succeed Marika. This pledge is not a casual agreement. It is a profound commitment, marked by the Tarnished becoming her consort and champion. This relationship is formalized through a series of tasks that demonstrate loyalty and shared purpose, culminating in the Tarnished assisting Ranni in her grand design to ascend to godhood. The very act of swearing fealty to Ranni represents a rejection of the established order, a turning away from the Golden Order and its associated deities. It's a choice that places the Tarnished firmly within Ranni's cosmic ambition, aligning their destiny with hers. The path to Ranni's godhood is paved with ancient secrets and powerful artifacts. It requires the Tarnished to navigate treacherous regions like the subterranean city of Nokron, the Eternal City, and the Lake of Rot, confronting formidable foes and unraveling the mysteries of the cosmos. A pivotal moment in this journey is the discovery of the Black Knife Print, an item that reveals the conspirators behind the Night of the Black Knives, an event that directly led to Godwyn the Golden's death and Ranni's own self-mutilation, specifically the severing of her Empyrean flesh from her spirit. This act, while seemingly a weakness, was in fact a deliberate move by Ranni to escape the influence of the Greater Will, the outer god that governs the Golden Order. As the Tarnished delves deeper into Ranni's quest, they encounter her true form, or rather, the vessel she chooses to inhabit, a doll. This doll, crafted in the likeness of a snow witch, is not merely a puppet. It is the physical manifestation of Ranni's spirit, a conscious decision to reject the corporeal forms dictated by the Golden Order. Her original body, the Empyrean flesh she cast off, was a vessel chosen by the Greater Will, tying her to its dominion. By abandoning it and inhabiting the doll, Ranni symbolically and literally severs her ties to the Golden Order and the Greater Will. This rejection is a powerful statement, an act of defiance against the cosmic order imposed upon the lands between for millennia. It signifies a desire for autonomy, for a destiny not predetermined by an external, celestial entity. The doll becomes a symbol of her liberation, a testament to her unwavering resolve to forge her own path, independent of the outer god's influence. This shedding of her Empyrean flesh is a critical juncture. It's not just a physical transformation, but a metaphysical one. By disassociating herself from the flesh that bound her to the greater will's design, Ranni effectively removes herself from the Golden Order's lineage and its claim to her destiny. This act of self excommunication is what allows her to become a candidate for a new divine order, one entirely separate from the Erd Tree and its golden glow. The Tarnished's role in facilitating this process, in helping Ranni navigate the spiritual and physical challenges associated with this transformation, is paramount. They are not just her champion, but her enabler, the one who clears the path for her radical ascension. With the Tarnished's unwavering assistance, and having successfully navigated the challenges set before her, Ranni ascends to godhood. This is not merely a change in title, but a fundamental shift in the cosmic power dynamics of the lands between. Ranni replaces Marika as the new god, taking her place at the apex of the divine hierarchy. However, her reign is not a continuation of Marika's. Where Marika was an instrument of the greater will, Ranni becomes a god who actively opposes its influence. Her ascension marks the establishment of a new cosmic order, one that she herself dictates. This transition is profound as it signifies the end of a long era defined by the Golden Order and the beginning of something entirely different. Ranni's new order is christened the Poiske Age of the Stars, and it is guided by the Dark Moon. The Dark Moon, a celestial body distinct from the Erd Tree's golden glow, represents Ranni's chosen path. It embodies coldness, distance, and the vast, unknowable expanse of the cosmos, contrasting sharply with the warmth, light, and perceived closeness of the greater will. This shift from the Golden Order's radiant sun to the enigmatic dark moon is a powerful symbolic gesture. It implies a move away from a singular, dominant ideology towards a more expansive, perhaps even more detached, understanding of existence. The dark moon, in its silent observation, suggests a less interventionist deity, one that grants greater autonomy to its subjects. Crucially, in this age of the stars, the Elden Ring itself is removed from the lands between. This is a monumental event, as the Elden Ring has been the source of all order and law, its runes dictating the very fabric of reality. Its removal signifies a complete dismantling of the previous system. The Elden Ring, having been repaired by the Tarnished, is now in Ranni's possession, and she takes it with her into the cosmic void, effectively severing its direct influence on the terrestrial realm. This act has immediate and far-reaching consequences. The influence of the greater will, which exerted its power through the Elden Ring and its Empyrean vessels, wanes significantly. With the primary conduit of its power gone, the greater will's grip on the lands between loosens, opening the door for a new era of freedom, albeit one that might also bring uncertainty. The removal of the Elden Ring and the waning of the greater will's influence directly lead to the breaking of the Golden Order's dominion over the lands between. For centuries, the Golden Order, with its rigid tenets and strict enforcement, has controlled every aspect of life, from governance to philosophy. Its laws, derived from the Elden Ring, have shaped the very landscape and its inhabitants. With Ranni's ascension and the Elden Ring's departure, this rigid control is shattered. The Golden Order's power structure collapses, its authority undermined by the emergence of a new cosmic deity and a new set of principles. This means the end of its dogmatic rule, its oppressive influence, and its ceaseless pursuit of a singular, unchanging truth. The lands between are now free from its iron grip, allowing for a diversity of thought and belief that was previously suppressed. A visible manifestation of this profound change is the dimming of the Erd tree's light. The Erd tree, the colossal golden tree that dominates the skyline of the lands between, is the physical embodiment of the Golden Order and the Greater Will's power. Its golden glow has been a constant, unwavering presence, a symbol of divine blessing and absolute authority. As Ranni's Age of the Stars dawns and the influence of the Greater Will recedes, the Erd tree's radiance begins to fade. This is not a sudden, catastrophic collapse, but a gradual decline, a visual representation of the diminishing power of the old order. The once vibrant, all-encompassing golden light gives way to a softer, more subdued luminescence, mirroring the shift from a prescriptive, omnipresent deity to a more distant, ethereal one. This dimming signifies not just the decline of the Erd tree's power, but the end of an entire epoch, paving the way for the profound changes that will define the Age of the Stars. The outer gods, those cosmic entities whose influence has so profoundly shaped the lands between for millennia, now find their direct interference significantly diminished. While their lingering presence may still be felt, a subtle hum in the cosmic background, their ability to impose their will, to dictate the very fabric of reality, is severely curtailed. This is not to say they are entirely banished. Their power is simply no longer funneled through a dominant Elden Ring and its associated order. The Formless Mother, for instance, may continue to whisper to her Mogwin dynasty, but her whispers now fall on ears less susceptible to absolute control. The Fell God, too, the ancient deity of the giants, might still stir in its slumber, but its fury no longer threatens to engulf the world in an unceasing flame. Even the Greater Will itself, the most dominant of these cosmic entities, finds its direct conduit severed, its influence waning as the very mechanism through which it exerted control, the Golden Order, is dismantled. This shift marks a profound change in the cosmic balance, allowing for a degree of self-determination previously unimaginable. With the sundering of the Golden Order and the establishment of Ranni's New Age, a fundamental alteration occurs in the cycle of life and death.